I'd like to start with a little apologia. I know this kind of upsets some folks who don't like change, as it was.
Who would that be,
expressed.
Maury?
But we had a big funeral down here last Friday, and our maintenance man had to get his vacation time in before the end of the year and so on, so it wasn't put back with the wrong tables and so on. So that's the explanation of why it's like this. It's temporary, and I'm sure we'll have it. So we're on round tables back when he comes back to work. So it's a new year, and just last weekend we celebrated the Feast of Holy Family, right? So I have a family prayer in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. We bless your holy name, O Lord, by sending your own incarnate Son, Jesus, to become part of our families, so that as he lived his life here on earth, he would experience its worries, its challenges, and its joys. And we ask you, Lord, to protect and watch over all our families, so that in the strength of your grace, its members may enjoy prosperity, possess the priceless gifts of your peace, and as the church alive in the home, bear witness in this world to your glory, as did the Holy Family. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. God's blessings on us in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So, while I'm sure most of you were off and holidaying and so on, gathering families, I look at, basically the age of most of you. How many had families come to your house with your grandmas and grandpas? Yeah, that's what I thought, about 90%, yeah. So, I had a nice, quiet, churchy and quiet holiday. Most of my brothers and sisters are grandmas and grandpas. So, they had their own family, stuff and so on. Although this weekend we're gathering together as a huge family at a place over the weekend. So hopefully I get a weekend off. So what I proposed in the next couple of weeks, since we're still in the Christmas season, is I went into the files and I found we did a little background on the infancy narratives back in the year 2000. I don't know if, other than Maury Reed, I don't know if anyone else remembers that. Maybe Tom over here, And then in 2012, we looked just on the Luke portion of the infancy narratives, and we're in that season of, with the Gospel of Luke again. So I thought, well, maybe some people kind of forgot, and we do have some new members, and of course, since 2012, now we're full blown on YouTube. So maybe some people would benefit this. For those of you who were here back then, or way back then, this will be like a review, okay? But the sheets that I had for you does a comparative study. There's only two of the Gospels that really do have anything concerning what we call the infancy narratives, the narratives about Jesus and Jesus' birth and so on. So we're going to start then with the historicity of the events. Historicity. When you come here, I gotta give you a couple 25-cent words, right? So, I did not, it's in your book in Wango, you gotta take a look at it. So, history is, one definition for history is humans' collective memory of events and people at stages in the course of human lifespan. So, humans' collective memory of events and people at different stages in the course of the human lifespan. So, if we take a look, this weekend we celebrate the Feast of the Epiphany, right? So, some people will right away say this is the Feast of Three Kings. Well, let's see, you take a closer look at that. It's only found in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 2, really the beginning of chapter 2. So, if we take a look at the actual scripture, because this is a Bible study, right? So we might as well look at the Bible and see what it says. So when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising, and have come to do him homage. When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it has been written through the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, since from you shall come a ruler, who is to shepherd my people Israel. When Herod called the Magi secretly and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may go and do him homage. Yeah, right. And after their audience with the king, they set out. And behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them, until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. And they were overjoyed at seeing the star. And on entering the house, they saw the child and his mother, Mary. And they prostrated themselves and did him homage. And then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. And so, and if you skip down to verse 16, to continue this aspect of the story. And when Herod realized that he had been deceived by the Magi, he became furious. And he ordered the massacre of all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity, 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time that he had ascertained from the Magi. And then was fulfilled what had been said through Jeremiah the prophet. A voice was heard in Ramah, sobbing and loud lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children, and she would not be consoled, since they were no more. And in between, you see a little paragraph that says that the Holy Family took flight and went off to Egypt, right? So, in this Matthew's account, you don't find it in Luke, you don't find it in any other gospel. Right? Now, one of the things, oftentimes when we recount the events of Jesus' birth and so on, and as we depict them as well in our nativity sense, It's like we've taken the account here from Matthew, the account from Luke, and like shuffling cards. We shuffle them all together, we jam them together, and so on. All right? So, for instance, how many of you have a nativity scene, and how many of you already put out the three wise men?
Yes
You don't
and
have
no.
three wise men.
Yes and no, yeah. They're still over on the
Challenging to
channel.
find three wise men.
That's right, three wise men in this group.
You only got two wise men. Because someone knocked over one of them and broke him last year. One's on injured reserve. So Matthew has this account, and so if we look at it, it starts out by talking about Herod, the king, in Jerusalem. Now, so placing this in history. Now, Herod died, according to Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian from the first century. Herod died in around the year of 750 from the founding of the city of Rome. Why would he use that as the founding thing? Because he was writing for the Romans, Josephus was. So 750 from the founding of the city of Rome would have put Herod's death at 4 BC, what we would call 4 BC. 70, 50 AUD. So AUD, stands for, in Latin, the founding of the city of Rome. Now, so why do we account, differently? Who started?
Augustus Caesar.
Who started counting like modern day years with the birth of Jesus at year 1? Gregory did not do that. Pope Gregory did not. Way before. Julian calendar, that's a good guess. Yeah?
Did Augustus Caesar figure in there somewhere?
Augustus Caesar figures in when we look at Luke's account. Not Matthew's, but Luke's account. Okay? And we just add that at Christmas Eve, the gospel reading for midnight mass on Christmas Eve. So the answer to the question, when did we start counting with Jesus being born on year 1? And that was started in 433, a little monk called Dionysius Exegesius. Okay, Dionysius is Dennis. Exegesius is either short or dwarf. Little Dennis. He was a monk, okay, in 533. And he chose the year 754 as year, the accounting of the founding of the city of Rome. So he was 4 years off, all right, from Josephus. Maybe he didn't have a copy of Josephus. But when it said in the account that Herod sent his soldiers to kill all baby boys 2 years and under in that vicinity, chances are his ascertaining from the point of the star of the Magi, that would put the birth of Jesus at either 6 or 7 BC, what we would call BC. Okay. The date. Now let's take a. So Dennis the dwarf. Blame him. He was short by 2 years now. It's more than that. Magi or Magi. That's the next thing for us. Who were these men? They were not kings. They were not kings. Counselors to kings? Yeah, probably. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 6th century, he describes an intriguing cast of priestly caste from the empire of the Medes. The empire of the Medes predates the empire of the Persians. The Persians, of course, overran the Babylonians, right? And it was the Persian kings that allowed the Jews during the Babylonian exile to go back and to rebuild Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Actually, the Persian kings helped finance the rebuilding of the temple and so on, okay? And we find that in the post-exilic prophets. Now, that's Persians, but the Medes before them from the same area. What is the same area? What we call today Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan. Okay? That's the geographic area today that we're talking about. Now, there is a religion that was already founded in that area, and it's a religion that exists yet today, although very, very, very small. One of the oldest religions on the face of the earth that had continuous religions. What?
Zoroastrianism.
Very good, Grandpa.
That's all I got.
Yeah, you're right.
What did Maury say?
Zoroastrian.
He's a convert.
The followers of Zoroaster. Abraham's father is said to have worshipped the moon god. So Zoroastrian, some accredit them with the what? In the skies.
Stars, heavens,
Angels.
heavens.
Zodiac. Although others would say, well, it was predated in China. But there were studies that, they studied those stars and so on. The book of Daniel, written about 200 BC, talks about the Magi flourishing at every corner of the Babylonian kingdom during the time period of King Nebuchadnezzar. So, now, who were these Magi? One breakdown has them two different categories. You have the scientific Magi, and you have well, you could call them the occult Magi. Okay. What's the difference? Well, the difference is scientific Magi studied the stars, different combinations in the zodiac, and they interpreted that for some of those kings, evidently, in the Mede or maybe even Persian Empire. Okay? So they were like, for the kings, Mede and Persian kings, they were like the counselors, the staff, the White House staff, if you will. Okay. There were others, however, who delved into fortune telling. Some were magicians, some were practitioners of occultic arts, the black arts. Some were priestly Ogres, yeah. Fakes, charlatans, fakers, okay? That would make predictions, you know, in people's personal lives for money, you know? Yeah. They're called weathermen, yeah. Sorry about that.
Good one.
Tom Mahoney and Kinsey's watching, you know. So, and this was present, and we even find it present, you know, in the Acts of the Apostles, when Stephen goes up to the area of the Samaritans, there was a man that he encountered who wanted to buy the power of healing that the early church had, and his name was Simon. Simon, the magician, it's usually translated as. And you can find him written up in the Acts of the Apostles. And Peter encounters him even after that. So, they're from the east of where? And that's really a good question. Because if we try to get a handle on this, their true identity, you know, it says we saw the star arise in the east. East of where? East of Bethlehem, east of Jerusalem, east of Judea, east of Europe. Where did it come from? You know, if they, you know, Persia, and you know, you think Iraq and Iran, that's way out here. Here's Jerusalem, okay? It's, you know, way out here. So that's west.
But
They would have had to see a star west of them, right? Huh?
Yeah.
West of them? Huh? This is east. That's west. So if they come from here, they saw a star arise in the east, it would have been in China. So Jesus was born in China?
Well, you
No.
never know.
No. So, you know, how can we understand that, you know? And then we sing that song. Well, you can sing that one, right? We three kings of Orient are,
Oh, people of
very gifts we travel upon, building foreign yonder star. At least I had yonder star, it doesn't say eastern star, huh?
From FVCBS.
Okay.
The nursing home. by now.
So, let me give you some background. So, the early church fathers, their tradition in identifying, more specifically, these three magi, identified them with the Zoroastrian prediction of a Messiah. Now, Matthew, it's believed Matthew's gospel, which this is from, he wrote maybe in the northeastern corner of Syria, near Edessa, which is only 50 miles from Persia at that time. Okay? Edessa was a very famous place back in ancient times. So it could be Parthian or Persian. It could be Babylonian. Most favored was from a star rising. References are found in Babylonian and Chaldean astrology. Babylonian and Chaldean astrology. And astronomy. And in the sciences. There's also, based on, well, you're going to hear the first reading for the Epiphany is from Isaiah chapter 60, and it talks about the gifts. Let's see, let's take a quick peek at that. Isaiah chapter 60. So it's towards the end of Isaiah. So, starting from verse 5, Isaiah chapter 60, verse 5. Then you shall be radiant at what you see. Your heart shall throb and overflow. For the riches of the sea shall be emptied out before you. The wealth of nations shall be brought to you. Caravans of camels shall fill you. Dromedaries from Midian and Ephah, all from Sheba shall come, bearing gold and frankincense, and proclaiming the praises of the Lord, and so on. Okay, so, you got two of the gifts, right? Gold and frankincense. What was the third gift? Myrrh. Where does myrrh come from? Basically the same place as frankincense. The southern part of what we call Saudi Arabia. So, dromedaries, you know what that is,
Camel.
right? And it mentions caravans specifically, right? And frankincense, and later myrrh, right? And basically in ancient times, about the only known place that came from was the southern part of Saudi Arabia, present-day Yemen, United Arab Emirates, way on the south end, okay? And that's where frankincense still comes from today. So does that mean the three magi were Arabs? They stopped and shopped on the way, okay? Spoken like a true shopper.
Father?
So, stop to think of it. So, caravans, even in ancient times, what would have been a currency, certainly not paper currency, that would be accepted in every kingdom? Gold. And it would be accepted along the trade routes, and it would be accepted by any kings in any little kingdoms that they went to as tribute, also known as a bribe. Okay, you had a question?
I had a question. It doesn't mean that they started out together. If they were a caravan, they could have joined. But then, in order to see the king, they had to be pretty up there.
Well, the thing is, if they, and it was much later on that they are identified with different continents and so on. So that's a possibility that they joined up somewhere along the trade routes and so on, going to Jerusalem and put their heads together and ascertain that the star that they see is in alignment with what they would interpret as a newborn king of the Hebrew people. But they must have known the Hebrew people or the Jewish people, And they weren't known as Jewish people until after the Babylonian exile. Okay, after the Babylonian exile. Why? Because they wanted to return to the land of Judea. So they became known as Jews. Okay, Doc?
Well, this is not important, but did you see the cartoon where the Magi are shopping on Amazon for gold, and it says, people that shop for gold also were looking for frankincense and myrrh?
I did not see that. I don't have a habit of looking at cartoons for about 60 years now. Yeah.
There had been a prophecy in their language of a new king. That's why they were going to search him out. Where did that come from? Where did the prophecy in the Zoroastrianism?
Well, searching the stars okay? If they were astrologers and had advanced, you know, beyond just the signs of the zodiac and predictions on like you have today.
So what kind of, king were they?
Well, they simply identified it as evidently a newborn king of the Jews because of the Jewish people, yeah. It's something else for us to look into. So, first of all, I want to point out, you know, did they find the child with Mary and Joseph? No, it just mentions Joseph, or Mary, right? So, and it's about 2 years, all right? And it's in Bethlehem, right? Right?
That's what we understand.
And they found them in the cave?
No.
In a home or in a house? What do you have in your dynamic translation, or did Santa Claus give you a brand new Bible for Christmas? Huh?
Matthew?
Matthew.
Verse 11. Chapter 2, verse 11.
When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt.
No.
Oh, you're in Isaiah.
No. Matthew chapter 2, verse 10 or 11. No. You fast forward to verse 13.
On coming to the house, they saw the child.
House. Stop right there. House. Dynamic, equivalent translation, house.
That's what I got, Jerusalem Bible too.
Jerusalem Bible to house. So they were settled, huh? Mary and Joseph had settled, evidently in Bethlehem for maybe up to 2 years. They came to a house. Now, and then what did they do? They prostrated themselves and did him homage, and then they opened their treasures. Treasures? Coffers? How come we always say coffers? Doesn't the song say coffers? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh?
Kept in a coffin.
What?
Kept in a coffin.
Kept in the coffin?
Treasures were in a coffer.
Coffers is a coffin, is a coffin,
That's a,
okay.
that's a box.
The Greek word is actually, and you would recognize this as something else. Thesaurus. The thesaurus. What's a thesaurus?
Dictionary.
Huh? A companion to a dictionary, right? That's the Greek word for they open their
Book. Sorry.
treasures. We get the word treasure from it too, okay? And offer the treasures of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, we break down, and we saw in Isaiah that he mentioned gold and frankincense, right? I indicated that frankincense and myrrh came from southern Saudi Arabia. Gold would have been used across all the trade routes, and so they carried some pretty precious gifts, that they gave to the Holy Family. They gave to Mary anyhow. Yes?
I'm just wondering if there was no star at all, because footnote 2:2 of Matthew chapter 2, it says, we saw his star. It was a common ancient belief that a new star appeared at the time of the ruler's birth. Matthew also draws upon the Old Testament story of Halley, who had prophesied that a star shall advance from Jacob. Though there the star means not an astral phenomenon, but the king himself.
Okay, so the star. This, and the connection with even the readings that we will have for the Epiphany, not only Isaiah 6, but the Psalm, that we use this weekend from Psalm 72 will talk about the kings of Tarshish and the Isles, and the kings of Arabia and Sheba bringing gifts and tribute to the king of Jerusalem. Now, that psalm is about the time of King David and Solomon, and probably more Solomon, and kings from all other kingdoms coming and bringing tribute to the king of the Jews. That's like, 900 years before Christ, huh? And the psalm saying that. Now, this is the part, okay, I'm going to give you a couple more 25-cent words. Okay. This is part of what's called Haggadic Midrash. Haggadic Midrash. I mentioned these before, okay, here. So, Haggadah, what does that mean? Okay, there's in Hebrew literature, there's two forms of storytelling. And one of them is identified as Haggadah, okay? And it's taking a historical event and putting it in words, in a literary form or story form that can be easily remembered, okay? Haggadah, okay? And then Midrash, a little more technical. Midrash is taking what is a literary motif and like reinterpreting it
Commentary.
within, not a commentary, but a reinterpretation of, oftentimes in Hebrew literature, an event that happened earlier, and then it's taken and it is used to reinterpret it. That event is reinterpreted in another event, in another historical time. So, for instance, let me give you an example. Well, the next thing, the killing of the little kids, the innocents, and so on, right? So in the book of Exodus, the new Pharaoh put out a call that all the Hebrew boys should be killed. Remember? And Moses' mama put him in a basket, told his older sister Miriam to watch it, floated down the aisle towards the Pharaoh's daughters and the princess, right? And then he was taken out of the bulrushes and so on, right? Okay, but that earlier story is that the new king had called for the death of all the Hebrew boys 2 years and under. Now, here we get the same thing. A king, King Herod, being threatened when he gets this unexpected thing, news from Magi that there's a newborn king of the Jews, and so he calls that all the boys in that area be killed. So it's taking a story from an earlier time, reinterpreting it in another time period. It might be you might call it a parallel or so on. You see? Okay, understand?
Yep.
Huh?
Sure.
And then those other references, even in the Psalm where it talks about kings shall come from Sheba and Arabia and so on, well, that kind of fits in with the possibility that at least one of the kings may have been, from Saudi Arabia. The other question that people ask, how many kids do you think were killed?
Each time. They figured 20,
50 to 20?
not 50.
This was
Isn't
just,
there a footnote on it?
this is just in Bethlehem, right?
And the vicinity, it's a
Oh. I read.
Couple hundred at most.
couple hundred at most.
Those
So,
areas are-
Justin the martyr, you know, one of the earliest apostolic fathers of the church, who, you know, dies in the midpoint of the 2nd century. He was born around the year 100 in Samaria. He states that Herod had all children killed regardless of age. Byzantine liturgy, in the Byzantine liturgy, it cites 14,000.
Oh,
In the Syrian calendar of saints, it cites 64,000. If you correlate this to Revelation chapter 14, verses 1 through 5, it would be 84,000. Equaling the number of those who have not been defiled. So, these are obviously exaggerated numbers, you know, because they would have had, Bethlehem would have had to have a lot more women in Bethlehem than there was in the 1st century at that time. Right? Plus, they had one less baby boy, right? Because Jesus left. So, chances is more realistic, calculating the Bethlehem population in the 1st century at most around 1,000, with a high infancy mortality rate, maybe 30 births a year. Okay, 50% would be girls. So 15 males under the age of 2, maybe 20 at the most. Okay, what?
A year, you have at least 2 years.
No, that not, they didn't kill them off. They didn't kill 2 years straight.
No,
The kids had it 2 years ago, yeah,
So that would have been 30.
yeah,
right.
possibly, you know, possibly. But there was a high infancy mortality rate. So the kid had lasted till they were going into their 2nd year. Chances are he would have died anyhow. The other key is that quote here in Matthew. And you, Bethlehem, land of Judea, are by no means least of the rulers. After that. Verse 18. A voice was heard in Ramah, sobbing and loud lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children. So, Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 15 portrays Rachel, the wife of the patriarch Jacob, weeping for her children taken into exile at the time of the Assyrian invasion of the northern kingdom. Bethlehem was traditionally identified with Ephrathah, the place near which Rachel was buried. And the mourning of Rachel is here applied to her lost children at a later age. Ramah, about 6 miles north of Jerusalem. The lamentation, that's something else. So, the lamentation of Rachel, if you go to Israel, between Jerusalem and Bethlehem is south, there is the tomb of Rachel. And of course, Rachel, as that footnote says, was the patriarch Jacob's wife who lost a child in that vicinity, you know, as Jacob was migrating back to the land where he was born. So that was a very important thing, part. Now, this is, Matthew puts this here in order to, you know, show that, okay, that prophecy then has been fulfilled. So this too is part of maybe what we would call Christian midrash, okay? Taking a earlier event and reinterpreting it, okay, in a later age. A couple other things. I don't even know if I should tell you about this. Well, in between, right above that, it says that in a dream, verse 13. When they had departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt and stay there until I tell you. Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. Joseph rose and took the child and his mother by night, departed for Egypt, and he stayed there until the death of Herod, but what the Lord had said through the prophet would be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son. This too is a part of Midrash, okay? Earlier, now, Egypt was a classical land of refuge for displaced people, okay? Why?
Yeah, why?
Why?
Yeah, why?
They always have building projects going on. You know, pyramids, shrines, temples, right? They always have building projects going on. And what was Joseph by trade? He was a technikon in Greek, a technikon. If we interpret that as carpenter, we think of someone who could just, you know, hammer and nails and build. No, he was much more skilled than that. A technikon there, he could have been a mason, he could have been an artisan. Technikon was a much broader category than just pounding nails and, I don't know.
They probably didn't have
screws
nails.
yet. General contractor, okay. Yeah, okay. So he was very skilled, yeah.
So you're saying a technicon, so where do you get this from when all the readings are perfect?
Where-
How do you reach this now?
Because in the original Greek, that was the term. That's translated as carpenter. He translated from Greek, the original language, to English. Carpenter is the easiest way to translate it. And of course, now in the 20th century, we've added a new interpretation of anything with technical in it, right? Okay? But now you know also that our word, technology, technical, and so on, comes from a Greek word, right? Okay. That someone who possesses that skill would be a technical. So the bottom line is this: wherever Joseph would go, in order to ply his trade, all he needed was his bag of tools. Right? Right? Because his skill was here and here. Right? So he fled to Egypt, a land of refuge. Now, here's the thing. We think of, that was, you know, how could they get there in one night? Well, they couldn't have gotten there in one night. You know, it's you know, Egypt is from Bethlehem and Judea is too far away. What? We hear about Gaza all the time, right? Gaza on the shores of the Mediterranean. And Gaza is from Bethlehem probably 25 miles. Like the Gaza Strip and so on. And even back then, that part was a part of Egypt. Yeah, Gaza was. Okay. Close your mouth, that's okay. I know I'm giving you shocking information here. Okay, yeah, that was seeded, you know. So here's the thing. You want to hear some Christian midrash of the flight of the Holy Family? This is written up in some of the early fathers of the church and apologetic writing. Many miracles along the way, like they were protected by dragons, like lions and leopards wag their tails in reference. There's a apocryphal story where palm trees bent down to offer their fruit to the Holy Family as they passed by. What is the fruit of a palm tree? Yeah, that's it. Dates. Yeah. You can buy dates in the grocery store. Take a look at where they come from. California, maybe, near Cairo, Egypt, there's a Jewish center. And it said Jesus was responsible for the growth of balsam or palm trees. This is the tradition that is found even in the Muslim Quran, the Muslim book. Why? Balsam is a cure-all for healing just about anything. There's a tradition that in the Coptic Church. Coptic Church, of course, are Christians from Egypt. The Holy Family stayed at places up and down the Nile River, even as far as 225 miles south at Persia. There's also a tradition, this is a bit story. Along the way, there's a tradition that two robbers attempted to plunder them, but one, seeing Mary's tears, repented. Later on, in that story, those two robbers became, at Jesus' crucifixion, the two.
On each side.
Okay. But, you know, that's Christian midrash. You never heard that? You never heard that before? Why, I told you that in 2012.
It's a revelation.
It's a revelation. It's a good thing I'm going back over this stuff. Okay. But it needs refreshing. Yes, Patricia?
Father, in Anne Rice's book, she talks about them having relatives in Egypt that they stayed with. Where would that have?
Well, that could very well have happened anywhere. Maybe some of those relatives were left over from a much earlier migration. Okay. And they stayed there until the death of the king. That was also kind of reminiscent of earlier stories as well. So when we take a look at it, okay, one more thing that puzzles a lot of people, that star business. Yeah, does that? Gary, are you into
No, I'm
astrology?
not. I'm just puzzled, that's all. I spend a lot of time puzzled, so.
So that has trouble. You're in good company, Gary, because that puzzle and you know, famous people like the 17th century astronomer Johannes Kepler was studying astrological phenomena and so on, and between the years 14 and 4 BC, and his guess was this was a supernova. And if you watch, you know, Nature Channel or some of the supernova is a brand new star that finally the light years, you know, catches up to our years, and so, or it could be a comet. What's the most famous comet? You hear that comet? Halley's Comet comes around the world, you know, every 77 years, right? Did that match up at all with these dates? Well, the first recording of Halley's Comet was in 240 BC. 240 BC
Just go.
in Europe and China and Japan in historical records. So if it was in Europe, it was probably from the Greeks. And so if you count from there, and it appears every 77 years, then chances are it's the ballpark years, it appears between 12 and 11 BC over Judea. Now, that's still about 4 or 5 years off, right? From the birth of Jesus.
But that ain't.
Or it could be, here, Gary, again, Kepler, he calculated the different planets in alignment, okay? Especially Jupiter and Saturn. Kepler calculated that it happens every 805 years, that Jupiter and Saturn, and sometimes Mars, kind of lines up. And when they line up, they appear as one star. And that would have happened between 7 and 6 BC. It would have happened in May and June, September and October, and December of 7 BC. Okay? So, you're questioning, Gary, and others who are questioning, you're on the same wavelength, as the famous astronomer Kepler. Okay, now you can go home and calculate, Google him up, and you'll find out, what kind of company he has. Okay, so, those are theories, however. And we don't, there's not facts. Very quickly, to sum up, carrying the gifts, those gifts have significance, and they would have been interpreted allegorically as gold representing royalty of Jesus. Okay, frankincense, the divinity of Jesus. And the myrrh, is passion and death of Jesus. In anticipation of the passion and death of Jesus. But, and it was, who identified them as, their names, right? You remember that?
Yeah.
Balthazar is one of them,
Melchior
Melchior,
and Casper.
and Caspar. Okay, that didn't come until the 7th century. Till the 7th century. Okay, and it was Venerable Bede in the 7th century, early 8th century, who made the suggestion that they would represent Europe, Asia, and Africa. So it wasn't until the 7th or 8th century AD that, the identification of 3, and that one of them would be dark skinned to represent Africa. Okay. And if you look closely on the statues you have here, one may have kind of a little oriental look. Okay. But then again, that didn't come from, that came from Venerable Bede in the 8th century, okay? Because of the, contacts that they had at that time. It's just, which was which? Okay. I'm not sure. Okay. This is all just added on. It's all part of Christian midrash. If you think too much about it, you can only get a midrash yourself. The bottom line is this, folks. In Matthew's purpose of the visit of the Magi, which is central, particularly to the liturgical feast of Epiphany, there's a song about manifestation. And Epiphany, of course, is a Greek term that means a manifestation of a God in general. And so Greek's purpose with the visit of the Magi shows that Gentiles responded to Jesus. They came early in his life to pay him homage, to show faith, while his own people, Herod, Jerusalem, the scholars at Jerusalem, didn't recognize him, didn't have a clue. It wasn't until the Magi from an outside that came in and, said, don't you see that bright star up there over Bethlehem? We followed it from afar, It represents the newborn king. Oh. And of course it said, because King Herod got concerned, everyone got concerned because of the history of King Herod killing off all those who would come and, So, the bottom line is, can't you see the star? My eighth grade teacher, Sister Ursula, gave us this little proverb. I don't know if you ever heard it. Two men looked out prison bars. One saw mud, the other saw stars. Thank you very much for coming. There you go, sheets. We'll go back and take a look at it.